So when I found out I had cancer and it looked like lymphoma, I was thrown. It was such a shock, terrible shock. So even though I was presenting back all the time and getting all these tests done, no one was looking at my case holistically. And actually, it took that trainee GP who had time. Well, I'm a person that loves being with other people. I'm an extrovert by nature, and all my life I've loved connecting with other people. And I guess to sum myself up, I'd like to say that first and foremost, I'm a mother and I've got two adult children, one that's 33 and one that's 31, and a grandmother for the first time. My first grandchild was only born. I guess the theme of my life too has been one where I've been a high achiever, and I've got several university degrees and have a curious, inquiring mind and love to learn. But this was back in early 2019. I was working at that point for an aged care organisation and was commissioning a very high value new community, and so a lot was riding on it. And I just felt incredibly tired because it was a full-on demanding kind of a role. And I went to the doctor and just said, I'm feeling really tired and not sure whether it's menopause or I'm 61 now. I would have been in my late 50s then. And so they ran blood tests. And at that stage, the results came back. Things were pretty normal except for my inflammation markers, which were raised. And at the time, it was explained away by saying, oh, you must have been fighting off an infection or something was going on. And so I just accepted that, but made a decision to change jobs. While I loved that job, it's turned into a toxic kind of a love, and I need to look after myself. So, and then my nature is to throw myself into things. So even though I was feeling tired, plugged away, again, trying to achieve, I guess. And in the October of 2019, my son, who lives in London, I hadn't seen him for 18 months or so. So I went over to the UK and Europe for a 3-week flying holiday, really. And while I was there with him, we went to the north of Italy. And while we were traveling around there, I caught the flu and just couldn't shake it. So on the way home, I coughed, just couldn't stop coughing. And so when I got home, I just thought, I'll get over this cough. It'll eventually heal. Then that summer, which was a really bad time environmentally for Australia, and all around where I live were dreadful bushfires. And so the air quality was quite bad. So it was very easy to explain away this cough, thinking, oh, well, there's a lot of smoke and soot in the air, and this cough's being aggravated by that. And it seemed to be worse at night. So in February of that year, I thought this is really getting me down. I went to the doctor, the GP, and said, I think I need an X-ray. There's something wrong with my lungs or something, because I cannot stop coughing. And at that point, she said to me, I think it might be postnasal drip. Here's some this stuff to spray up your nostrils. That'll solve the problem. So I went away, tried that, nothing. So then I went back, and it was March 2000. So we're in 2020 now. March 2020, COVID had hit. And she said to me, we can't send you off for x-rays because all of the radiology is being kept for patients with COVID, and you don't want to be in that environment. So no. So I kept coughing away, thinking this will resolve. And then it wasn't until about the June that the situation with the radiology eased up enough where I could go and have a lung x-ray. And at that point, the x-rays were clear. There was nothing wrong with my lungs. And so I was sent off then on a round of visits with specialists. So I went to an ear, nose and throat specialist looking for this postnasal drip problem. They put a camera down my nose and to my throat. He said to me, I can't see anything wrong with your ear, nose and throat. Your throat is inflamed, and obviously it was because I'd been coughing for months. And he said, I think it'd be worth trying an alkaline diet, which basically is like a vegan diet. Then there was a question mark, well, maybe there's something wrong with your heart. So I had an appointment to see a cardiologist who wanted me to have an ultrasound of my heart before I went. So I did that, went and saw him. That was all perfectly normal. And might I say, each time I saw these specialists, you're looking, I know the health system's different in Australia, but it's like 400 Australian dollars, which is more than 500 US dollars each time I went. That's not claimable on my health insurance. You know, it's just part of the picture of feeling desperate, thinking I've got to find the solution. So on I plugged, and then we're now in 2021. And February, I'd gone away to Canberra for my girlfriend's 60th. And while I was staying away, I had this incredible burning sensation in the flank of my back and just couldn't get comfortable in bed. And I thought, gosh, I've pulled a muscle, still coughing, by the way. Gosh, I've pulled a muscle. There's something weird going on here. And went to the physiotherapist thinking it was a pulled muscle. That didn't help. And so in the end, I went to the doctor again, who said, this is very unusual, and again thought it might be reflux or something. Why would that? There's all these sort of trying to explain things away. I went to the gastroenterologist, and she said to me, this is in May of 2021, I'd like to get an ultrasound, a CT scan of your abdomen, and we'll get an idea of what's going on. And once you've done that, we'll get you to do an endoscopy and a colonoscopy, so we'll know from in an internal perspective. So the results of the CT scan came back, and when I looked at the report myself, and I was at the GP's at the time, I said to him, why does it say my spleen is enlarged and some of my lymph nodes are enlarged? And again, it was explained away, oh, you probably just had some sort of infection. And that's at the point where it should have been picked up. Anyway, it was in the November of 2021. I woke up in the middle of the night with excruciating back pain. And I thought to myself at that stage, still coughing, by the way, gosh, I must have a kidney infection. And the pain was so bad, I could have rung an ambulance, but I didn't want to end up in hospital. So I rang up and I said, I need to see a doctor immediately. I don't care which doctor I see, because normally I was seeing one doctor. I'll just see anyone. I think I've got a kidney infection and I need medication. So they fitted me in with a trainee GP who I'd never met before, but I was desperate. And bearing in mind, this is all through the pandemic. And so I walked into the doctor's surgery with my mask on, went into her rooms, and she started talking to me, and I began to cough. And she said, you shouldn't be here. You might have COVID. And then I burst into tears and said, I haven't got COVID. I've been coughing like this for 2 years. And she went, oh. And anyway, she got me to go away and do the urine test to check for my kidneys. And while I was away, she got into my files and started reading the reports from all of these tests that I'd been having done. So when I came back and she tested my urine, she said, no, there's nothing wrong with your kidneys, but I think there's something quite seriously wrong that I can see from your results. While you've been gone, I've booked you in for another CT scan this afternoon, and I need you to do some blood tests before you leave. So she said, I'll have the results back tomorrow morning and we'll be in touch. Make sure you get that done today. So off I went, did those things, thinking, oh my gosh, what is going on? The next morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call from the doctor's surgery saying, doctor would like to see you later today and you'll need to bring someone with you. So you can imagine I was panicking, and my appointment wasn't until 5:30 that afternoon. So in I went, and I had my partner with me, and that's when she was the most delightful person. If there was somebody to break news like that, just really empathetic and kind. And so, I sat there and thought, I cannot believe this, because the year just earlier that year in the April, so this is in November 2021, in the April of 2021, I turned 60, and thankfully I had a big 60th birthday party. And at my party, when I was giving the speech, I'm saying to everyone, this is a milestone birthday, turning 60. I'm 2/3 of the way through my life. I'm so excited to see what that third's like. And I'm so glad you're all with me. Let's go on this new journey for the final third of my life. So when I found out I had cancer and it looked like lymphoma, I was thrown. It was such a shock, terrible shock. So we came home and I just sort of we sat out on the balcony, and I just can't get my head around this. Anyway, she had rung the head hematologist for the region that I live in, and made an appointment for me on the following Tuesday. So when we went and saw him, he said, I think you might have diffuse large B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but we need to do some tests to find out for sure. So he said next steps is to go and have a needle biopsy, which I did. And, with those sorts of biopsies, you've got to wait 7 days for the pathology to come through to confirm what the cells have told. And so I went to that next meeting by myself, because it was in early December by this stage, and I was on a board of directors, and there was a Christmas party on at lunchtime. But because I was so overwhelmed and stressed by the diagnosis, I was driving on the highway and had an anxiety attack in the car. So I'm driving and thinking, I've just got to keep breathing. And somehow I got my car into the car park, multi-story car park, and made my way up to the 7th floor where the hematologist was. And I'm sitting in the waiting room, waiting to see him, thinking, breathe. Went into my appointment, and I'd calmed down by that stage. And the hematologist said, unfortunately, the results were inconclusive from your needle biopsy. It looks like you've got follicular lymphoma, but the symptoms you have don't match up. We need to do another biopsy, but this time it'll need to be surgically done, so we get a larger sample. So anyway, at that point, I thought, whatever, because I was so anxious and overwhelmed by the thought this cancer is running rampant in my body and nothing's happening. Weeks are going by, and the feeling of that was, I was so anxious. And I think that's something that not many people talk about, is that I really felt like I was losing my mind, to be honest. And for a person that was so normally together and could handle anything, it shocked me no end. And I actually went back to that trainee GP, and I said, I'm so worried about myself. I said to her, I always worried about the CT scan that I'd had in the May, where I'd asked my normal doctor plus another doctor, and why would my spleen be enlarged? I didn't understand the importance of looking at the size of lymph nodes, because not being trained medically, I didn't understand that. But I thought it's very unusual that my spleen is enlarged, and maybe that's explaining why I was having abdominal discomfort in my left-hand side. And those two doctors, as well as the gastroenterologist, did not say there was an issue. So I was extremely upset about that. And the trainee GP said to me, we can't worry about that now. We've got to accept that that's happened and move forward. So it sat with me for quite some time. And because she was a trainee, she had plenty of time to talk to me. And she explained to me that when you have a diagnosis like this, you go into stress overload. And the symptoms that I'd been experiencing, not being able to sleep and having anxiety, huge anxiety, and those attacks like I had in the car, they were completely normal. And when I heard that, I thought, oh, that makes me feel a bit better. It's not going to be like this forever. But she said to me, let's look at some strategies. So one of the strategies was whenever I go for a medical appointment, I'm not to drive myself because that's just a recipe for disaster. And also she did prescribe some sleeping pills and said, just take those for a couple of nights just to break because I just needed some sleep to be able to cope. And she also prescribed Valium and said to me, this is highly addictive, so be very careful with it. And, do you know, just knowing I had it there as a crutch if I needed it was really all I needed. I did take a few, but they were the days when I started treatment because that was pretty full on. But that was such a help. But anyway, I then, on the 23rd of December, so 2 days before Christmas, had to go in and have the laparoscopic surgical biopsy where trying to find a surgeon just before Christmas was really problematic. But we, fortunately, a beautiful surgeon, she made time for me on that afternoon of the 23rd. And but then I had to wait over Christmas for the results of that with a very sore stomach, might I add. And on the 27th, the hematologist rang me up and said, right, we've got the results back. It looks like you've had follicular lymphoma that's now transformed to diffuse large B cell, so non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. We're going to start treatment tomorrow. I found, and because the cancer clinic where you can normally go as an outpatient, during the day, that was closed down between Christmas and New Year. We've got to get you started straight away. I found you a bed in our oncology ward in the public hospital. So I went to the public hospital in a shared ward, and the only bed that was available was in a palliative geriatric oncology room. So there I was looking at my future with these old people, at the end of their lives. And that completely upset me. And it's funny how I'm normally a very upbeat, glasses half full kind of person, but when I was in there, I was argumentative, extremely unhappy. And every time they wanted to take blood tests, I'd argue. And I might say before all of this, the hematologist wanted me to have a gated pull test, I think it's called, on your heart to check on the functioning of your heart before you start any sort of chemo treatment. And I'd gone in to have that test done, and two of the radiologists had tried to find a vein to do the injection of the dyes. And they had jabbed and jabbed and jabbed. And bearing in mind I was at my wit's end emotionally, I ended up saying, that's enough. And I just left and got to the car and collapsed into tears and thought, I'm not having one of those tests. And anyway, in the end, because I do have a bit of a problem with needles, they that afternoon sent me off to have a PICC line inserted in my arm, which was the best thing ever because I didn't have to face needles and finding veins every time I went in for treatment. But I did settle down after that. And do you know the way I settled down? I actually said to myself, I have to surrender to this process because if I don't, it's going to kill me, just the process and the stress of the whole thing. I've got to surrender and accept. And they were the two words I kept focusing on while I was in that hospital ward, because the doctor had said to me the day before, come in for the day, we'll get you started on the treatment, bring an overnight bag in case there's that you have a reaction to something, but more than likely you'll be home. But there I was lying in this hospital bed, and when the rituximab started, so R-CHOP was that went on for hours. It went on all morning, the infusion for that. I couldn't believe how long all of this took. And then the remaining drugs then took the rest of the afternoon. And that night I slept so well because I think I was just exhausted emotionally and physically from the whole thing. About July last year, I was due for another skin cancer check. My GP, the one that I used to see, who'd been explaining things away, talking to me about lifestyle medicine and relaxation and whatever, was the doctor who's now moving into doing skin checks. So I went to see him because I thought this would be really important for him to see me now. And anyway, I was in the waiting room and I waited and waited 40 minutes, like much longer than normal. And when I went in, and bearing in mind, I was all dressed up, but I had my wig on, and because I had next to no hair. And when I went in, I looked pretty normal because I had this wig on. But he said to me, "Oh, Leanne, I've just been reading through your file, and I am so, so sorry that this has happened to you. And I cannot understand how I missed this." And he said, "I'm going to spend a lot of time reading back over your files and learning from this so that it never happens again. And I am so sorry." So that was important for me to hear. And then when it came time for him to do my skin check, I said, "Can you check my scalp while we're at it? Because I've just noticed some marks up on my scalp." He said, "Sure thing." And then I ripped my wig off. And that was the biggest shock he got. He didn't realize I had a wig on. And then when he saw me with no hair, I could see tears in his eyes, and it really upset him. And I thought, I'm glad I shocked you, because this is not just a paper report. This is a person's life. And you know that I've been coming to you for years. The fact that he apologized was very important. And the fact that he's saying he's learning from it. And it makes me wonder, as a doctor, whether that's a pivotal moment in his career of listening. Because I think a lot of our doctors, and I'm sure it's the same worldwide, they're so overworked. You've got an appointment, you're in and you're out within 10 minutes or so. And so even though I was presenting back all the time and getting all these tests done, no one was looking at my case holistically. And actually, it took that trainee GP who had time, and she told me her appointments were an hour apart, because it's all part of her just learning the profession. She'd had, all of the years of training and so on, but these placements were part of it. And she had the time to sit and read and think and connect the dots. And thank God I crossed paths with her, because if not, who knows how much further along I would have gotten. And, and the shock that I got, even though I knew for some years I wasn't right, and stopped working full time and had started slowing down my career, thinking, I don't feel right, don't know what it is, but I just know I can't keep pushing myself the way I used to. To have that diagnosis was just a terrible shock. And I guess the lesson I learned from that is never let go, and advocate for yourself, because there's no other way.